This case that I'm about to present is very unusual, and the way that it turned out, there was actually a miraculous ending to it that I thought was amazing. People get diseases and they get over them all the time. However, it is very, very, very rare for someone to get over a persistent neurological disability. I see that so infrequently that in this particular case, because of the miraculous nature of how it ended up, it's very encouraging on one hand, and it's very remarkable. It's also the story of a very unusual type of malady. Carol, the woman who's going to be talking in a minute here, she was in her car with her children in the back seat, and they were all strapped in, but she was unrestrained in the front seat, and she was broadsided by another vehicle, which hit the passenger side. It caused her to then bounce and then hit the passenger side window really hard, slamming her head into the passenger side window right in this area. Now, this area is on the side of the head up front here. This is where the division is between the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe. Together, that region is called the operculum. The operculum is responsible or necessary for you to verbalize your thoughts. In order to control your tongue and your larynx to form words that make sense, the operculum needs to be intact. When she struck that window, it caused massive severing of many of the connections in her operculum, resulting in an expressive aphasia. She was unable, she can think the words, but she was unable to express them. It didn't show up right away, but what happens very often is when you have damage to that area, the initial strike does cause damage, but later on, your body's inflammatory response kicks in. The microglial cells get hyperactivated, and you end up with swelling and a lot of inflammatory cells in the area, and that repair process very often does more damage than the original injury. And so over time, you lose function. Okay, I've had several cases like that throughout my career. This is, however, the only case that I have where expressive speech was lost due to a traumatic injury. Now, what happened was, the first time it happened, she lost all capacity for speech for a period of 7 years. And then it gradually came back and she was restored. However, it was tentative because the connections that formed were good enough, but then she was involved in a second car accident, probably resulting in traumatic shaking of the brain and loss of those few connections that reestablished themselves, and she became completely mute again for another 2 years. So it's an unusual case. Listen to it. The whole story is like 45 minutes. The way this ended up, I do believe that her faith had a huge role to play in her healing process just because it happened so suddenly. It's an amazing story. So go ahead and take a listen. I hope you find encouragement in it. And for others who might have this type of injury, because it's not very common and doctors aren't terribly familiar with this type of thing. I certainly wasn't. So for others who may have this, maybe you can look at this and say, I'm not the only one. Okay? So enjoy.
First time was a car accident also.
Oh, really? Tell me about the car accident. When did it happen?
1997.
So in 1997, where were you going? What happened?
I was on my way to Kmart and with my boys. My boys was in the back seat of the car, and I was driving. And at first, before the accident, I had stopped to put their seatbelts on, make sure their seatbelts were on. Mm-hmm. And I thought I had did my seatbelt, but apparently I didn't. Oh. And this truck ran a stop sign and hit me broadside, and it spun us into a ditch. And my boys weren't hurt, but I flew from one side of the car to the other side of the car and hit my head on the passenger side of the windshield. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't lose consciousness. I sat back down and got back in my seat, and someone called. They called the police, and ambulance, and my boys were too scared to go in the ambulance, so I refused it, and I told them I would take I would have someone from my family take me. And when I got home, the police took me home because my car was totaled. And I got home, my niece took me to the emergency room.
Okay.
And they checked me out and everything and said, it looks okay, but we don't know yet. So I said, okay. And he said, sign the paper so you can go home. And I couldn't sign my name. And all I did was the pen would just twirl in my fingers, and I couldn't put anything on the paper. And I was like, that's weird. I noticed that. And the doctor thought I was on drugs. I did drugs. So he said, let's get a urine sample. I was like, why do you want a urine sample? Oh, I just want to check. And so I knew it was, he was thinking of it. So I tried, and he said, well, just put an X. And I was able to put an X. And so I went home, and the next day, I was talking to my sister, and she said, you seem like you talking slow. I was like, am I talking slow? So she said, you dragging your words. I was like, oh, okay. So that went on for a while, and then I started stuttering to the point where I was like, like that. I didn't go back to where the accident was until a friend of mine took me over there. She said, let's go over here where your accident was and see the spot. I was like, why? I just want to go see it. So I didn't want to go see it, but she took me over there, and it brought back the memory of me being hit, and it somehow traumatized me. And then after that, my arms would shake, and I would have this jerking motion. And when I went to open a car door or any door, I couldn't just go and open the door, or it would be like this. And I almost, I was going to that job, and I was at work, and I just didn't feel right. So my sister came and got me and said she was going to take me to the emergency room to see the doctor. And I couldn't walk normally. So by the time we made it to the doctor, I had to be helped in because my legs were, I don't know, it was like I was having a seizure, and all my body was moving and shaking, and but I was conscious of what was going on, wondering why I couldn't control my body. And the doctor checked me out and said I was having a seizure because I had closed head injury. She said there's nothing, she did all kind of tests. She said nothing I can see, but and I don't know how long this is going to last. And so I was like, okay. So it would like every, I'd say other day, I would have these seizures until I had it one so bad that they, my mom then called 911, and I was admitted into the hospital.
And you never had seizures before?
Never had seizures before. And I stayed in there for a week, and I still had the seizures, and they had like a night watch person watch me to see to count them, how many seizures I would have during the night. And after it got down to maybe 3, they said I could go home. Said I could, yeah, because they couldn't say what was causing it. So I went home, still had the seizures, and then by then it was November, Thanksgiving, and I was talking to my mom and my sister in the kitchen, and I got really upset. And my sister said, "You should, you just go to bed and just we'll discuss it in the morning." During that night, I cried myself to sleep. I mean, I was really upset that I had hurt my mom's feelings, and when I got up the next morning, I had a friend over, and he was gonna go home he was going back to Chicago. So I walked him outside, and he said, "I'll see you later. I'll be back." And I went to say, "I see you," and in my head, I could hear the words coming out, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out.
Wow.
I mean, absolutely nothing. And I was like, huh? And I thought I could say something. It seemed like my lips were moving and voicing something, but nothing was actually coming out of my mouth. And I went in and I told my sister, and she was like, "That's because you need to ask your mom to forgive you." And I was like, oh, trying to tell her I can't do it now. But it was we couldn't figure it out, and from there for it just nothing. They told me I had to do speech therapy. And I was like, how am I do speech therapy when I have no speech? And so I went, and I just sat there. She was like, say, and I was like, and she was like, you should be able to say something, and saying, she thought I was faking. I was like, why would I come to you and fake? She's like, we get all kind of people. I was like, okay, well, I have no reason to fake not talking. I have something I want to say. And so speech therapy didn't work. And so I went to, I said I wanted to go to school. I learned to learn sign language. And that way I can communicate. And instead of, because at first I started writing everything down.
About what year was this?
This was still 97.
Okay.
The accident happened February of 97, and then I lost speech completely in November of 97. So it was a period of time. And then in 2001, I went to school. That's when I went to school to learn sign language, and I took up deafness rehabilitation, and I learned sign language, and I was able to communicate with my sons because they learned sign language at the same time I did, and that's how I communicated. Other than other people, I would write things down for them.
So you could write?
Yeah, I could write. Got a TTY, and I used the TTY most.
What's a TGY?
It's a telephone for deaf and mute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You dial 711, and then it connects you to a speaking person, and that person speaks for you on the phone. It's your voice. So whatever I type, that's what they say.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I've never heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. So people are like, "You sound white." I was like, I was like, you don't get to pick the person, that speaks for you. So you know what? And most people thought, because I still could laugh through the whole thing, I still could laugh. So most people thought, just because I have laughter, then it can't be I can't talk because I have laughter. But out of every time, I never lost the laughter, so I was able to laugh and stuff. So I liked it, that part. But I got some, and I lost a lot of friends too that way too. My best friend at the time, we had been friends for many years, and we had been through some things, and our children were about the same age, and she was raising her daughter, and I had my sons, and we would go to each other's house and everything. And she was there, in the beginning when I had the seizures. She was right there, but I guess she never said it, but she said it, that she couldn't handle it. And so I said, it's wrote her and told her, it's nothing I could do. And she just stopped being my friend. She would tell other people, oh yeah, we talk, but she just stopped communicating with me altogether. And a few of them told me, just because you can't talk, I don't like the way, I don't want to write things down to communicate with you. I don't want to have to read anything that you write. And so I don't think we should be friends anymore. And that was very hurtful, but I said, okay, it's nothing I can do. I can't fix myself, this is how I am until it comes back, or if it comes back. And that's when the doctor, psychologist told me, she said, if you could take a pill and it come back, you get your voice back, would you take that pill? And I said, but I can't do that. It's not, I know a pill is not gonna work. And she was like, I'm just saying hypothetically. But I already know that's not gonna work, so I don't have an answer for you. No, I wouldn't take that pill, because I know if they had a pill, a lot of deaf people and other mute people would have just taken that pill.
Were you able to say anything at this time, or were you completely unable to speak words?
For about 5 years, I was unable to speak any words, and then garble would come out. So in my head, I could form words. I can hear myself trying to say, knowing in my head what I want to say, but when I open my mouth, it would be like that, and it just didn't. And it was like, what? It didn't form what was in my head. I thought I was saying something, but I actually wasn't saying anything understandable.
In the accident, do you remember exactly what part of your head struck the passenger side door? Or the passenger
This part of my head.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It changed my opinion of myself.
How?
I pitied myself because I thought I should have been able to do better than what I did, speak better than what I did, because in my head I could hear English, but when I opened my mouth, it was not English, and I thought I was having a pity party. That's what I was doing. I was feeling sorry for myself.
Did this eventually get better? You mentioned the first time and a second time. What do you mean by that?
The first time, it lasted 10 years.
Okay. The muteness.
The muteness, yes. And then it just came back, and I was talking normally like I am talking now.
About what year was that?
That was 2007.
2007, okay.
Yes. And then I had another car accident in 2016. And that accident, I didn't hit my head. I had a jerking motion, and I don't know, it was like I saw the accident before the accident happened. It was like I couldn't do it, and I couldn't do anything about it. It was just going to happen. So I think that again, seeing that traumatized me, and I was okay for a while. I was okay, and I was able to do everything I normally did, and then my speech started going slow again, and but this time I didn't stutter. It just slowed up, and then it just stopped. I was talking, and then I couldn't talk.
Just stopped all of a sudden?
Just stopped all of a sudden.
About how long did that take to go from slow to nothing?
It did take long that time, because I went to, you sent me to the doctor, and when I was going to that doctor, I still had, it was still acting, it was sort of like it was going out. That's what I felt. It was going out. It wasn't stuttering, but it was slower than what I normally talk. And so the tests, they did a lot of tests, and she said she couldn't find anything. I said, but is something wrong, because my speech is leaving? And she couldn't explain it, and I couldn't explain it. I'm like, you the doctor, you know? So it just I don't know, and then it stopped, and I didn't panic or to go through the stresses I did the first time, because I had been through it before. So I was able to be calm about it. And a lot of people thought I was deaf when I would go to, say something. I'd be like, way high, and I learned how to go and and I could do that. So most of the time people would hold a conversation, I'd be just going
But you couldn't say anything.
But I couldn't say anything beyond that. So they didn't know. They was just talking. So I would just listen, and they'd be like, "Thank you for listening to me." And I was like, "Okay."
But you couldn't say okay.
No, I'd be like. So, but this time it was different. I didn't feel I didn't have the pity party. I was able to go through it much better.
How long did the muteness last the second time?
2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Were there people that remained supportive during that second news stage?
Yes. Through the first one and the second one, my oldest sister was my rock.
Okay.
She remained steady with me no matter what. She was like, you gonna talk. She always told me, you gonna talk one day, you gonna talk to me. And I was like, saying okay, to her. But and I have a new friend, her name is Sheila. She made fun of me with it, but it was in a way that it was okay. That she knew I couldn't, because she was there when it went out, and so she knew I could talk before, so it helped her, and she would talk to me, and she would make fun of me, but it was friendly fun.
Okay.
Yeah. At first, I said, "Why me?" And then God was like, "Why not you?" And so I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah, why not me? Who am I? Not that. And the second time, I didn't question God. The second time I told God, I don't want my voice back. And, because I had a lot of people that really, they took advantage of me because I couldn't speak. So they would tell people that I said something and I couldn't talk, and they would tell people, she told me such and such and such and such. She could talk, she's faking. And I'm like, why are these people, telling people I'm talking to them and I'm telling them this and that, and I haven't been able to say a word. And so people were doing that to me, so I was like, well, I don't want to talk. I don't care if my voice never come back. And I told God, it did, just keep it. I'm good like this, and but I wasn't upset with God. I was just saying I was frustrated with what I was getting from people. Through my listening and to people, I really started getting in, and not being able to speak. I really started getting into the Word. I read my Bible. I was going to church, and I was actually paying attention more than I usually would pay attention. Because before I lost my voice, sometimes go in church and and go to sleep. And I was like, so when I lost my voice, I was more attentive, because the voice talking was gone, so my hearing was better and seeing things was better. So I saw people in a different light, and it made me focus better, and I really heard what God was trying to say and what He wanted for my life, and I tuned into that, and I was able to really listen and concentrate, and it made changes in my life. I was a better me. Yeah. Before in the mutinies, I go, but I was there, but I wasn't there. I was always doing something else, or writing, or doing something else, so I wasn't paying attention. Then when the mutinies came, I was like, I guess something came over me, like, you go every Tuesday night, you may as well pay attention to it, and I got involved, totally involved, and once I got involved, I heard the Word as and I understood the Word as what it was trying to, they were saying, and I was like, I'm understanding this, and you know, the classes. First I would sit way in the back and just be there and looking around and like, you know, I can't say anything, you know. And then in the muteness, I was just to be like that. And then I thought, you know, you can't hear what they're saying, so I started paying attention, and it just clicked for me. We were discussing love in Sunday school, and each lesson was about love, and it was focused on love for God, love for family, love for your neighbor. And the love of God, I was like, do I really love God? And I was like, yes, I really love God, and I want to please Him and to be a better me. And that lesson, that was a good lesson. Then it went to family, and it says you need to ask your loved ones to forgive you, even if you didn't do anything. Ask your loved ones to forgive you. You should love your family, and you should have a connection with them. It shouldn't be disconnect where you're not talking to your siblings or whatever. And so I said, at the time, my sisters weren't speaking to me. My elder sister had passed away in January of 2018, and my other sisters were blaming me because my sister passed away, and me and my sister had a connection, and the other two sisters, they had their connection. So it was me and the elder sister that were close, and then my other two sisters, they were close to each other. They were not close to me and my elder sister.
Why was that?
Well, they shunned me because I couldn't speak. They didn't try to communicate with me. They would ask my elder sister, what is going on with her? And she was like, ask her. And they was like, nah.
Were you close to them before the muteness, or did this change because of the muteness? Did the muteness bring this about?
Yes. They did like the friends did. They pretty much stopped talking to me. It was like they knew I could write things down, but they wouldn't stop to have a conversation with me. They would talk like I'm not in the room, talk about me like I'm not in the room. So they would talk to my elder sister about me, and she would be like, she's sitting right there, you know, you can't ask her, you know, but they would not try to communicate with me. Yeah. So after my elder sister passed away, then they waited for a while, and that love lesson about love your family and forgiveness. And so I texted them, my two sisters and one of my brothers. I texted them on a joint multi-text, and I told them, I don't know if I did, but if I did anything, I want you to forgive me because I love you. And I think we should, and if you have any sort of feelings for me, we should be able to communicate. And so they waited a while. Before that text, I had texts. After my sister passed away, I had wrote my other sister, the one that's next in line to be. And so I wrote her a letter and asked her if she could step up in the position of being my big sister now. so that I could have someone that I could talk to about my son. You know, because she has a son and he's older than my son, and she can give me advice and things like that. And she didn't write me back. She didn't respond with a text. She didn't respond with a phone call. She just ignored it, like I had never sent her the letter. And from that, I said, okay, I guess that's a no. So I would send them texts weekly. I would send a lot of friends, joint texts and to say, hi, how you doing? I love you. Just thinking of you. I love you. And I would write some scriptures in the text that I would send. And my two sisters and my brother would never respond. Wouldn't text back and say I love you too, or I got your text, something. They never would. For 2 years, they never said anything. And so when that lesson came and I wrote and I texted them, they texted me back, we agree, that we should communicate. And from then on, they started communicating with me, and I didn't say anything to anybody. I just said, I'm thankful. And at the same time, one of my sons, quit talking to me. And so I said, I'm going to pray for my son that he'll talk to me again. I'm not going to give up on him as a mother. And I would text him every now and then and tell him I love him. I miss you, Whenever you ready to talk to mama, then we'll talk. And he would ignore all my texts, or ignore my phone. He wouldn't answer my phone calls. And so I said, okay. But, I have him, I'm praying for him that it'll change. And so that lesson came, and then it was like your neighbor. And I was like, who is my neighbor? That's everybody is my neighbor. And so I started treating everybody like I would want to be treated. And so once I started that, it was like a change, and a light came on, and my life was totally different. I felt like living. I felt like I had something I could say to people. And I wanted to talk. Then I wanted to talk, but I still couldn't. I wanted to, though. So my mind had changed from, Lord, you can keep up my voice, and to, if I could talk, I would tell you such and such and such and such and such, and then it was a life-changing thing. Inside had changed, so it showed more on the outside. Okay, the day we were in Sunday school, before I lost my voice, I used to help the teacher and the mother with big words that we were discussing in the lesson. So if they come by a word and they couldn't pronounce it, I would tell them how to pronounce it.
Before you came here?
Yeah, before I came here.
What is a mother again?
Church mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And before I would help them with with words, how to pronounce it. And then when I became mute, they was like, you gonna help me again one day. One of these days, you gonna help me. I was like, So all of a sudden, we were in this love section of the lesson, and we were ending it. But all of a sudden, that Sunday, I had studied the lesson the night before. And I was like, this is a powerful lesson. If I could talk, I would just tell them how powerful I felt about reading and studying this lesson. But I was like,
that lesson specifically?
we were still on love, And I believe this one was on the love of God. And so I was like, this is a powerful lesson. It was like, it was hitting home. And so I closed my book up, and I was like, I should read that again. But I was like, no, I'm gonna save it. And if they ask, I was preparing for his questions in the book, and had wrote my notes out to answer the questions, and so I could show them what I had thought. And so we were just sitting there, and my church mother was reading, and she got stuck on the word disguise. And she's like, discuss. She was just making up stuff, trying to figure out how it was. And all of a sudden, I just opened my mouth and went, disguise. And I was like, what did that just come out of my mouth? And she was like, say it again. And I opened my mouth and it said, disguise. And we started praising the Lord. We just started praising. The Sunday school was over for us then. And we just praising the Lord now. And she was like, oh my God, you spoke. And I was like, yes, I spoke. And then all I could say was, won't he do it? And we went all over the church, and people were like wondering what was going on. And I'd go up to somebody, and they'd be looking at me, and I'd just say, won't he do it? And they was like, oh my God, she spoke. I hadn't spoken in 2 years. And all I could just say was, won't God do it? And she was like, go to the pastor, because the pastor had came in. He was in his office. And I said to the pastor, I said, God has done it again. And he was like, what? Everybody started shouting, and I'm shouting. And it was just a joyous time. And I went and I saw after Sunday school, I left. I couldn't stay for the whole service, and I went to see my best friend, and she looked at me and she was like, what? And I just looked at her. Then she asked about somebody, something had happened, and I said, girl, let me tell you. And she was like,
So it all came back at once,
everything. And I've been talking up a storm. It just came back. Once I said that word, it was like I was freed. I was back to being that I was a better person. I wasn't the same person. I was a better person. And I had something to say. And God wanted somebody to hear what I had to say. And I was like, oh, this is it. I'm not going to let this go back to what I used to do. And I'm going to move forward. And I'm going to bless as many people as I can. And people start asking me advice, and I would tell them, give them scriptures. And tell them, God will work it out for you. If he could do it for me, he could do it for you. And I always put God first. And it was like, oh my God. So when I came to you and I was like, I can't wait to tell Dr. Guy. I was like, I can't wait to tell you. I was like, oh my God. And because usually you would say something to me and be like, waiting for a response, and I'll be like, nothing coming out of here. And then I was able to talk to you and see your expression, and I was like, yes, it's back. I am back. Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
How are things with your family, with your sisters and your children?
It is a lot better now. It is a lot better now. They texting me and telling me that they love me and text me. Sometimes they call me, sometimes they don't. You know, every once in a while they call me, but they text me a lot more now. Every other week I'm getting a text from my sister. I love you, and I was like, I love you more. And you know, it's a lot better relationship now than it was, and I'm thankful for that.